For quite a long time now, Game of Thrones fans have been asking, what the heck is Bran up to? He gives people these long, intense stares. He shows up in seemingly random but important spots, says these cryptic sentences, and seems to have everything work out the way he wants pretty much all the time. Whether it's the Night King's death via the dagger he gave Arya, or telling a raging Samwell Tarly that he must tell Jon Snow about his true identity now, Bran is moving pieces around the Savas board. Or is he? Does Bran actually have a plan to all he is doing? I've honestly been flummoxed at what he's been doing throughout the season. Luckily, the actor Isaac Hempstead Wright gave an interview to New York Times that helped shed some light on Bran's actions. So let's dig in and see if we can figure out exactly what Bran is doing. The first thing we have to do is establish what exactly can he really do as this last green seer three-eyed crow figure. These figures, of which there have apparently been many going back beyond the first long night we learned this season, have powers that don't really seem that important in a world of dragons or necromancy: memory and sight. From his mortal body, Bran can look backwards in time and see almost anywhere and anything, it seems like. He's seen the creation of the Night King, Rhaegar and Lyanna's marriage, the birth of Jon Snow, Littlefinger saying chaos is a ladder to Varys in the Red Keep throne room, and as we learned in episode 4, picking up wheelchair designs from long-dead Targaryens. It seems like the entire history of the world is at his disposal. Bran also has the power of sight, and that manifests in a few different ways. For one thing, he can skin change, or warg as is known on the show, when his eyes go white, various animals like direwolves and ravens. And in his darker moment, he was even able to control Hodor like a puppet. Beyond that, he can see parts of the future, sort of like shapes in smoke, or similar to Melisandre, futures in flames. Nothing distinct though. Isaac described it like this in an interview with the New York Times on May 5th. As I understand it, Bran can't exactly see the future. I think he can have inklings. When Bran gives Arya the cat's paw dagger, he knows there's something important to do with it, but he doesn't know that, say, 6 months on, she's going to use it to stab the Night King. So I think it's still indeterminate and not classical causal mechanics, where he just views things as actions that follow one another. There's still some uncertainty. There are limitations, though, to what he can do. Bran's access to the world's memories, as he calls them, is limited by which ones he chooses to go watch. For instance, it wasn't until Samwell Tarly brought up the Rhaegar and Lyanna marriage that Bran then looked back through the Weirwoods and discovered, oh, yeah, that is true. So his power is closer to having a very powerful Google search of the history of Westeros rather than actually knowing everything that ever happened all the time. If you want to know how Rhaenys Targaryen actually died, who built the wall, or what happened when the jackass walked into a brothel with the honeycomb, Bran is your man, but only if you ask him to look it up for you. His more powerful ability, though, is the ability to change past events. In the Tower of Joy scene, Bran yells out to the teenage Ned Stark, and Ned actually hears him and turns around bewildered to look. Ned sees nothing, and then charges back up the stairs. And during the heart-wrenching hold the door sequence, Bran accidentally links the dying and young versions of Hodor and destroys the mind of the stable boy, permanently rendering him only to say a garbled version of hold the door. The main drawback to these moments, though, is that Bran didn't actually change anything. Those moments always happened in a time pretzel way. In Back to the Future, Marty McFly went back in time and changed events so that the reality that he knew changed around him. This doesn't happen in Game of Thrones. As Bloodraven said, the ink is dry, meaning you can't actually change anything. For example, we see Bran go back to the Tower of Joy again, and while this time Bran is silent, Ned turns again to look for who yelled father, to his past self that actually said that. And Bran has never known a timeline where Hodor didn't have his mind destroyed and said, hold the door. Everything Bran does in the past is just fulfilling what has always happened. Nothing has changed. It's a circle, not the diverging timelines you see in Back to the Future. So with these concepts in mind for what he can do, what kind of strategy does that enable? The main advantage it gives Bran is that he can take a person's entire life and watch it back like a video and understand them. We saw him do this with Littlefinger when Bran repeated his famous chaos as a ladder line back to a bewildered Baelish. And by giving Arya the Valyrian steel dagger, he set in motion the chain of events that would lead to Peter's death. How does Bran see these moments, though? How does he see his role in the larger game beyond the thrones? Isaac had this to say. If you look back in time, Bran isn't bothered by the death of Hodor because that's what had to happen to allow him to get away from the White Walkers. Bran views them as necessity for the greater good. Not for himself, but for the world, for time, for history. He says much the same to Jaime Lannister in the Godswood as Jaime attempts to apologize for shoving him out a window. Bran turns and says that if Jaime had not shoved Bran, Bran would have never become crippled and sought out Bloodraven, and Jaime would have stayed the same asshole person he was forever. However, Bran has a fascinating response when Jaime asks him why Bran did not tell anybody what really happened.
You weren't sorry then. You were protecting your family.
I'm not that person anymore.
You still would be, if you hadn't pushed me out of that window. And I would still be Brandon Stark.
You're not?
No. I'm something else now.
You're not angry at me.
I'm not angry at anyone.
Why didn't you tell them?
You won't be able to help us in this fight if I let them murder you first.
Bran does have an agenda, some sort of plan and goals he's after. He's not just a passive observer. Letting Jaime skate on his attempted murder was so that he could play some role in the battle and presumably going forwards after. Isaac again says as much when talking about how he understood why Bran told Theon Greyjoy he was a good man as the Night King closed in for the kill, that he was buying time. What this tells us about Bran is that he has truly embraced the idea that the people around him are expendable. In a chess sense, sometimes you have to give up a valuable piece to get your opponent to make a greedy move. That was basically his strategy against the Night King. He put himself in a vulnerable position the gods would, so the Night King would take the bait, and then Bran moved his friends and family around subtly so that Arya would be in a position to strike the final blow. There's nothing personal when Bran tells Theon, "You're a good man." What he's basically done there is that he knows that Arya is running and charging on her way to save the day, and Bran recognizes he needs to buy more time. And that's a real moment there where Theon could give up again, as we've seen him do several times before. He looks at the Night King like, is he just going to run away or give up? And Bran recognizes that Theon needs that final push to give it one last go, to buy enough time for Arya. He ended up sacrificing Theon as well as many of the defenders of Winterfell. Everyone around him now are assets, pieces to him in a grand scheme. But there is a catch to all this. Bran doesn't actually know what will happen. During the Battle of Winterfell, Wright claims that when Bran was warging, he was actually using his ravens to survey the battle and see what was happening. He wasn't off warging dragons or using the Night King like a puppet or any other crazy thing the fandom has come up with. He was watching how his strategy was currently working out, unsure if he would live or die during the long night. When he saw Arya racing towards the Night King, he turned and gave Theon the chance to be the hero he actually was inside. Not because he wanted a touching moment with Theon, it's that he saw an opening for Arya no one else could, and a role Theon could play in enabling it. And this goes back to what Bran can actually do as the three-eyed crow figure. His main skill is intelligence gathering and using people's pasts to make predictions about what they will do. With Jaime Lannister, for instance, Bran knew he was arriving soon from his seeing powers, and we can assume that in order for Bran to know that, he's been tracking him for quite a while. Maybe consistently throughout the last couple seasons, he's been keeping tabs on Jaime, studying him, watching him kill the Mad King, seeing his conversations with Cersei, seeing him give Olenna Tyrell mercy. Perhaps like the dagger, Bran recognizes that Jaime has some large role to play even though he doesn't know exactly what he is, so he's been paying attention. And he could be doing this with everyone he encounters from now on. And that is how he interacts with the world. He has the ability to make much more accurate guesses than anyone else by being able to see how everyone arrived to where they are, and to understand people in a way very few others do. But what is this all for? With the Night King now destroyed and his programmed desire to kill the Three-Eyed Crow and the children gone, Tyrion asks Bran this reasonable question.
You don't want it.
I don't really want anymore.
I envy you.
You shouldn't envy me. Mostly I live in the past.
According to Wright, all Bran wants now is to continue to exist. That he thinks that the Three-Eyed Crow is an integral part of the world and must continue to exist as a living library of history. He wants preservation of the Weirwoods and the Three-Eyed Crow into the future. But it may be a little bit more than that. We know that it isn't exactly true that Bran does not care about anything else. For instance, after he arrives back at Winterfell, Mira Reed confronts Bran about his lack of emotion and his oddness since escaping Bloodraven's cave.
You're leaving?
I don't want to leave you, but when When they come, I need to be with my family. And you're safe. I'm as safe as anyone can be now. You don't need me anymore.
No, I don't.
That's all you forgot to say.
Thank you
Thank you.
for helping me.
My brother died for you. Hodor and Summer died for you. I almost died for you. Bran.
I'm not really. Not anymore. I remember what it felt like to be Brandon Stark. But I remember so much else now.
You died in that cave.
What Bran is doing here is subtle, much in the way he normally works now. Bran tells Mira that he does not care, that he doesn't feel that he isn't Bran anymore. And what happens? She leaves. She goes back to Greywater Watch, far away from Winterfell. In a way, Bran saved her life, as he likely knew from the mark on his arm that Winterfell would be where the hammer falls hardest, as the Night King would be seeking him. It was a mercy for Mira. He also smiles and appears to be glad to see members of his family, notably Arya and Jon. Not so much for Sansa. So what is his plan now? His plan goes really beyond himself personally, and it appears even his family, Winterfell, or the Seven Kingdoms. Bran is following what he sees as the natural course of the River of Time. He looks in the past of everyone and everything, investigates how similar situations have gone in the past, and tries to set up things in the present to go the way that he thinks they should. He's less a manipulator and master chess player, and more a steward of time and memories and fate. Bran isn't always right. He can be surprised. He didn't really seem to know what Jon would do when he had to choose whether to tell Arya and Sansa of his true parentage. Seemed rather surprised that Jon asked him to do it. And until Arya ran up and killed the Night King, Bran was pretty much screwed. He used Theon to create more time for her, but that was a last-ditch effort. He also sent Sam in to be the one to tell Jon about his parentage. And one thing I've been tuned into as the season's been going on is that you have to pay attention to who Bran is talking to in an extended way, and nobody has had more time with Bran than Tyrion. After the battle planning scene, Bran had a private chat with Tyrion off screen for what looked like quite a long time, talking about where he's been and who he is now. And then after the battle, they met up again and had another chat. When Bran talks to somebody now, it's usually not an accident. He chooses his moments and words carefully, and that may be his plan in all of this. Tyrion. Tyrion stands in a crossroads of destiny between all the remaining leaders in Westeros. He's Dany's hand and friend, Cersei's brother, and a friend to Jon Snow. He also knows what Varys is planning after learning the existence of Aegon Targaryen and possible treason. Which of the remaining monarchs Tyrion chooses to support, or which secrets he keeps to himself, may decide who ends up living and dying in the next 2 episodes. In this last episode, we found out that was actually true. Tyrion's decision to take the secret of Jon's true identity to Varys, rather than Daenerys herself, set in motion the series of events leading to Daenerys bringing fire and blood to King's Landing. Varys, in response, tried to poison her and overthrow Daenerys through Jon's claim. Dany learned that Jon had gone against her warning, and all of this served to create enough doubt in Jon's mind that he could not commit to her, all coming back to Tyrion. What Tyrion does now, in what remains of this season, will be crucial, and he's had Bran's words in his ear. This has more or less been the hallmark of what Bran has done ever since escaping that cave. Bran's reactions to those he has met may be a hint as to what he thinks is coming, what path he believes the world is going down. He was more or less happy to see Jon and Arya, but then miserable, and cut off Dany when she tried charming Sansa. Perhaps he has seen in advance the massive death toll of her rampage that we saw, and all those eyes she shut forever, and perhaps even knows how her song will end. He looks at people's past, what they've done before, who they are now, even in private, and obeying where he feels they are going. He didn't know who that dagger would kill, only it was important in Arya's hands. He didn't know what Jon would do with the truth about who he is, only that it was important that he know. And on and on and on. Bran is the only one that can see all of this, the history of tragedy and pain and the endless cycle of violence in Westeros. Jon and Tyrion once had a conversation where Tyrion said that the White Walkers are too big for men's minds, that they prefer the small ones. Bran, though, is one of the few people that can handle these things, that he can see the larger board. He's seen the death of his father, the creation of a monster, heard the screams of those burning in Harrenhal from Dragonfire, and he's probably seen a scared girl walking out of the flames with 3 baby dragons. He's also seen, though, that he is helpless to stop or change any of it, that the ink is already dry. All he can do is watch the dance play out, listen to the wind between the leaves, and feel the time flow around him, and every once in a while, move that one pebble calling out to him, and see the river change course in the way it was always supposed to.